Welcome to F1 Coffee Corner, Full Beans. I'm your host as always, Terry, and I'm here to keep you up to date with all of the unbiased, hard-hitting Formula 1 news. So grab your favourite mug of coffee, sit down, strap in and get yourself comfortable to join in the conversation. Because this is F1 Coffee Corner. This is Full Beans, the must-have podcast for all Formula 1 fans. Welcome to F1 Coffee Corner, Full Beans the podcast, and this is the pre-season test edition. It's Friday night. Pre-season testing has literally wrapped up about an hour ago. I'm in my shed. It's freezing cold. I've got a heater on. So let's not waste any time. Let's sit down, strap in, and get into this week's episode. As always, I just want to start off by saying, if you haven't already, please hit that like, that subscribe button, that follow button, whatever's available to you, so you'll be notified when these podcasts dropped. And can I just say a massive thank you for all the support I've had as I've gone to this weekly system with the new season approaching us. So, yeah, getting the niceties out of the way, let's dive into pre-season testing, Bahrain, and what did we actually find out? Well, I think we found out that the playing field isn't really that much changed in terms of the teams and where they are. But we'll start from the top. Let's start from Red Bull and the RB20, because I saw the RB20 in Milton Keynes last week. I saw it there with the covers off it. And even I had no idea that it was going to look like it did on that opening day when those covers come off and we saw those vents, and then we suddenly saw those massive sort of shoulder pad vents behind Max, which had me literally scratching my head most of the day, looking at drawings, looking at what it could be, looking at what Adrian's done. I'm still unsure, if I'm honest. I've read a couple of theories on it. Some of them make sense. The biggest sort of theory that's made sense to me is that it's running with a V-duct rather than an S-duct, because that way you don't need an outlet for the S-duct because we couldn't find it. And yeah, so what I will say is whatever Adrian has done, it looks like it's going to be a beast of a car again. It looks like it's got potential to be developed. It looks like it's got that RB19 pace that it shares with its predecessor, and it looks like it's got a lot more evolution as the season goes on. Talk about evolution, I just want to touch on zero side pods. Do I believe that zero side pods are coming from Japan on the Red Bull? The answer is no, I don't. And there's a reason behind this. Now, I think when we talk about Mercedes concept, which is what there's been a lot of talk that Red Bull have done with this RB20, we're talking about the shoulder pads, we talk about the way the side pods are done, we talk about the slimmer radiation. But when you look at the radiator layout on that RB20, it doesn't look like it can be easily configured to zero side pods. I think it was Albert put a picture up, and if you look, the configuration of the radiators in there, even though there's room to make it slimmer, it doesn't look like you can go to zero with it. So that's why I don't believe that zero side pods is coming out. I think the concept is a lot of the other things that the W14 had that Adrian's kind of took on board and gone, what can I do with this, around a very compact cooling system, around these big tunnels around the driver, but actually use them as vents, and the water slide effects that the side pods have got. I think that's what they mean by the Mercedes concept, not a zero side pod one. Can I see these side pods shrinking down over time? Absolutely. It looks like there's a bit of room to maneuver on there. Can I see it going zero? I'm going to say no. I'm never going to say never, because this is Formula 1. But for what I'm seeing, I don't think that's going to happen at all. But in terms of the car itself, it looks pretty solid, doesn't it? Out on track, quite clearly been some sandbagging going on. Max didn't get the memo on day one, but he certainly got it on day 3 when he was in the car, because he literally could have blown, I think, that fastest time that Charles has set earlier in the day today. He could have blown that away and chose not to. So I think that the RB20 has got a lot of pace. I think it's a good solid point for him. The way they're talking about how testing went well, how it's doing everything it should do. If you look at GP's face after day 1, they look like a team that's content with what they're seeing in testing. They look like they're a team that the car's doing what it should be doing, and that obviously allows itself to be developed later on and turned up to the max, excuse the pun, next week in Bahrain when we finally go racing. So I think Checo's not as comfortable as it with Max, but how many times we've seen that with Red Bull? I'm sure that a cue arguments of the car's designed to suit Max. It's not. It's designed to just be the fastest car possible. There are characteristics that suit Max's driving style. You've only got to look at Daniel for a prime example of that. When he went to McLaren, it didn't suit his driving style, yet now he's back in Red Bull designed cars, actually he's looking a lot more comfortable, a lot more competent. I think that's a thing that keeps getting overlooked quite a bit, and it's a thing which people kind of confuse with a car's designed to one driver. And also, the top drivers, they've got this ability to adapt a lot better, haven't they? They can just do that. And I think Max is certainly that category of driver where he can pretty much adapt to the car and make it do what he wants to do more than perhaps Checo can do. So yeah, that's my thoughts on Red Bull. And very quickly on those, I think there's more to come from them. I think they'll be happy with the progress. I think it's ominous for the rest of the grid, that's for sure. Then we'll come on to Ferrari now. Ferrari kind of have had a bit of a quiet launch their season. Even their launch was a bit quieter than normal. Last year we had quite a big fanfare. This year it seemed very low key. The car on the outside doesn't look dramatically different. The SF24 doesn't look that much different from the SF23. However, there are some telltale signs on it. They've tidied up the rear suspension, the diffuser area there. They've got these little outlets, inlets, outlets around the halo, which is doing some of the aerodynamics. It looks a bit more compact. It looks like they've addressed that tyre degradation, or certainly made a move to address it. Whether or not they've done that or not, only time will tell. It does look fast. The Ferrari has always looked fast. One lap pace. It's always looked quite a quick car. It's been able to maintain that race pace, but they'll be happy with topping the charts in day 2 and day 3. I know it's not a respective sort of time. However, they've got to be happy with the way it's running, the way it's going. Again, very quiet, not a lot of noise. We're hearing that they had their engine turned down, certainly in day 1. So whether or not that was respective of the time, they turned up in day 2 and day 3. Certainly going to be a force to be reckoned with. Certainly going to be a team to watch out for. Carlos looks like he's got a bit of a point to prove. They need to, stop their fatal attraction to drain covers if they're going to win a championship. Couldn't believe that once again. But yeah, so Ferrari, I think, will be a team happy. I think the changes they made to the car look good. I think it looks controllable, it looks solid. It looks like they can get some setup. It looks like they've got that raw pace still. They haven't lost that. It's just going to be what it does to those tyres, whether or not it can hold on to them and actually, give it the level it needs to be able to compete with races, convert that one lap pace into race pace and win races. And then hopefully that will allow the strategy team to get involved and make the right calls, and then allow them to sort of go down that route and that side. So yeah, good for Ferrari, good setup, good start. I think they'll be happy with that one. Who should we come to next? Let's do Aston Martin. Now, Aston Martin, I think, are hiding something in terms of pace. The only team not to really do any push laps. We're quite happy not to do any push laps. Arrived last year with this big fanfare over, a bit like Ferrari with a fanfare. A massive fanfare over, how well their car developed, how well it was, the strides they made in the winter last year. This year, very quiet, very sort of going about it. Lots changed on the AMR, not least the rear suspension and the gearbox. So they've obviously taken from Mercedes. So even that itself is a big change. Fernando has come out today, said it's Max's championship. The rest of us know that. That's typical Fernando. But yeah, no real pace from them in terms of showing us what they've got. I'm expecting a lot more. I think there's a lot more. I think they've had a set program and they've been very religious to it. And I also don't think they want to show their hand too much in terms of what Dan Fallows managed to achieve in the Aston Martin. So they are really on my radar to look out for next week, because I think that they might be not a surprise package because we're expecting them at the top, but they might just throw a few surprises in that chasing pack behind Red Bull that we got. Then we've obviously got McLaren. I'm a little disappointed with McLaren, if I'm honest. I expected more from what we were, seeing hidden at launch, what we were, kind of G'd up to expect with this livery drop and then this car and then all these angles and what have they done with it. And I can't really see a massive improvement. I think what they've done is they've made a gain from last year. I think they took last year's base model and made it better. So it's kind of like an evolution very much so of last year's car. Not a surprise considering how late they were developing last year's car in terms of, it took them a while to get going. So why wouldn't they carry that on? They don't look like they've fallen foul of the same mistakes they made last year in terms of their development route, which is great news for them. Bit of reliability problems sneaking in during testing. They won't be happy with that one. And running the older style sort of gearbox as well. So it looks like they're not taking the new Mercedes engine to its full capacity as well, which I don't know how much this is worth in terms of raw speed. But yeah, and the fact they're not actually taking it kind of might be a bit of a dampener on them. But even so, I think they're going to be there or thereabouts. The steps they made last year were pretty good. They got this new technical structure in place. It was really weird seeing Rob Marshall in McLaren gear rather than Red Bull gear, if I'm honest. They showed a picture of him on day one, I think it was, and I was like, what on earth is going on there? It just looks strange, but they've got a really good team. They've all started work. They've hit the ground running, quietly going about their business. Again, I think there's more pace in the McLaren. I think the drivers are happy with it, not talking up too much about their chances. Going to be a dark horse to watch, definitely. Then let's do Mercedes next. And the all eager W15, because ultimately that's what everyone was looking for behind the RB20, is what has James Allison done with the W15. And it looks like it's a lot better car in terms of stability. It looks like there's some clever innovations on it in terms of the front suspension, which we'll come on to in a minute. But ultimately, we've got this car. It looks a lot more solid. We're hearing that it's doing exactly what it should do in terms of the wind tunnel correlation, the CFD design correlation, which is great news for Mercedes. That's something they haven't been in a position to do for the past couple of years. So the fact they've now got this car, which actually is going to do what they want it to do, gives them a good base for development. Is it going to be faster from the off? I don't know. Like none of the top teams, no one's shown their true pace. I think there's more. We saw this suspension arm that James Allison's put on, which is kind of like a modular suspension arm where it looks like you can move the last one quite significantly back and almost change the whole setup and the anti-dive of that front suspension. Now that's going to allow so many opportunities setup-wise, if that's staying for the whole season, to be able to change your suspension arm and change your setup is going to be massive. We got obviously the front wing innovation, which the FIA have said is legal. The other teams are arguing, is it in the spirit of regulations? It drives me crazy, that rule. It's either legal or it's not. How can you say it's not in the spirit of regulations? Every team builds a car wanting to win. Therefore, that's the spirit of the regulations. The teams want to win. You know, we need to stop this grey area. It's either legal or it's not. If it's legal, let it go. Let it carry on. Let it be what it is. But yeah, quite an innovative design, going back to what they had before with the Vortex. So there's very thin beading because the rules say it's got to be connected end to end. The fourth panel has, so they've literally got this beading, I suppose is the only word to describe it, which brings it round so it complies with the regulations. If it's fast in Bahrain next week, I can see a lot of teams querying that even more, kicking off about that for sure. I think that's going to be on there. The suspension arm, I can't see how it can be queried. I don't see anything in the rules that say you can't have separate fixings and move your suspension arm. It would just be part of Ferrari rules, obviously. So my guess is with that suspension arm that they could literally do practice one with it in one place, practice two with it in the other place, or even run one car one way, one car the other way, and decide which one's best. And then therefore, they could then dictate that before part of Ferrari kicks in. So it does open up a whole world of possibility. Got that new rear suspension, got that new gearbox. We're hearing about a increase with a longer gear shift between 7th and 8th, which is going to give them a bit more speed as well. Looks like they cut off a bit of the drag. So actually, it's quite positive from Mercedes. I don't think it's going to be good enough to win a championship. I think it might be good enough to compete in that middle pack and then compete for wins possibly. But I don't think it's a championship winning car, certainly not from what I've seen. But I think when you think about how far behind on the development drive they were, by chasing zero side pod concept, that actually they're being in a place where they're quite happy now in terms of where it's gone to. Then we're going to come on to, excuse me if I forget because I'm trying to remember all of the teams here. We do VCARB next. I'm going to call them VCARB. I can't call them RB because I've spent my time calling Red Bull RB and I find it really confusing to myself. So I'm going to stick with VCARB. So don't hate me for that. That's just my thing. I think they'd be happy with the progress. Daniel looks quite suited to that car. Why wouldn't he? Yuki looks a lot more settled. It looks a good base. It's taken on those RB19 parts. Have they got the aero right? I don't think it's as dominant as what the RB19 was in terms of the aero package. It's quite clear that's going to be their Achilles heel. Whether or not they can develop that car in a way that gets back towards what the RB19 certainly showed is going to be a big debate. I think they're going to move at the pack. I think they're going to be a team that's going to be in the middle around that sort of you've got that Red Bull, and you've got that group of that Aston Martin, McLaren, Mercedes, Ferrari sort of gap. And then I think you're going to have the best of the rest. And I think that's where VCarb are going to come into it. I think that's where they're aiming for. That's where they're heading. I think they'd be quite comfortable in that position. I think it's one that they'd enjoy being in. But yeah, I think positive stuff from them. The car looks nice. Livery looks nice. It's nice to see a bit of colour on there. They've obviously made their changes with personnel, with Laurent Mecchi in place of Franz Tost as well. So it's going to be a season where they're going to be trying all out. We know that both drivers are out of contract at the end of the season, although we're expecting Yuki to sign for a further year until the Honda deal runs out. Daniel has obviously got one eye on the Red Bull seat himself, so he's going to be able to prove things. So I think it's going to be really interesting to see what that car does, especially development route it goes down, and whether or not it follows that RB19 development route and actually that transpires into performance. Stake F1, I'll do next. Who knows what's going on their name? Is it Stake? Is it Sauber? Is it Kick? All sorts going on their website and their sponsorship. But they've made some gains. They've made some suspension changes. Audi influence, it's starting to come through, although we're hearing a bit of rumours about Audi. But yeah, so we're seeing this change from that Ferrari Alfa Romeo partnership, I think it's fair to say, that they had. And they're now moving away from that. Valtteri and Joe know what they're doing in terms of the car, in terms of the team, are quite settled drivers. I think that there's a lot more to come from them. I don't think they're going to be enough to beat the likes of VCarb. I don't think they're going to be enough even to beat the likes of Alpine. I think they're going to be around that sort of area again. But, I don't think they're going to be bottom. We'll come on to who I think is going to be bottom. So I think they're going to be around that, probably challenging the likes of Williams and Haas, I'll say would be a fair guess at the moment to where Stake are going to be, although they might surprise me. Alpine are up next. They've changed their car apparently from front to back, and lots of change on it. It started off quite positive. By the end of testing, they've gone to this conversation of actually we've got a solid base, and when the development comes, it's going to be better. And as the season goes on, we're going to progress. Losing that engine power is a challenge for them, because you've got to make that back up with aero. Now, if you go back to the sort of Mercedes dominant days and the Red Bull fighting them days, we all know that Mercedes had that engine, they had that engine advantage locked in. Red Bull probably, I think it's fair to say, had as good as, if not a better aerodynamic package, but didn't have the engine to back it up with. Alpine are now find themselves in that phase, but haven't got an Adrian to design the car. So they've now got this car where they've got this engine that's not up to scratch, and they're trying to get it through aero gains, and it's just not going to be good enough for them, unfortunately. It's not going to be good enough to break into that top five of the grid. It's going to be a long season for them. I think that Pierre and Esteban are going to be looking at their future, because this is staying now to the regulations change in 2026. So they've got to make a call now whether or not they stick or twist in terms of driver market, which we'll come on to at the end. But yeah, I think it's going to be a long season for them, and I can see them potentially going backwards a bit as well, which it'd be a shame for them. But they are, I was going to say they are trying, but that sounds really condescending. I don't mean to. But they are still trying things out. They are still trying to mitigate that engine loss with the aerodynamic gain. That should be applauded. They've done a lot of work with the new Alpine. So I think that if they can maybe make some development gains, some of the tracks where that engine advantage isn't going to show through, a Monaco springs to mind, something like that, I think that they're going to hopefully get some good points and get some good results for the team there, because a lot of hard work's gone into that car. So I think they deserve some reward for that. Then I'm going to come on to Williams. Williams are a team, they kind of transitioned this car. James Vowell was really interested. He was talking about the decision not to take the rear suspension from Mercedes. So they're still on the old suspension, the old gearbox. It is a cost-saving measure. They're saying that there was some advantage to it, which was they could start development earlier. And by doing that, it allowed them to gain extra time in terms of wind tunnel time. So they're saying that's the reason why it allowed them to develop their new car earlier. I think it's got a lot to do with costs as well, if I'm honest. It looks better in terms of cornering ability, but then it's the old trade-off, isn't it? It looks like they've now compromised some of that top speed on it for this trade-off for a better aero package, which, Alex Albon said we've cured last year's problems. We've now got this whole heap of new problems. So I think that with Williams, they're certainly a team in transition. I think that James Vowell's has done a good job with his first car in terms of the first full season behind him and the pre-season and development-wise. I think he's made some very shrewd business moves, which will help Williams. I can't wait to watch the first race in Bahrain at Williams next week. Completely shameless plug for that, but I'm going to the Williams Experience Centre to watch the Grand Prix, so I can't wait to see that and hopefully see a good result. But I think they're going to struggle again. I think high-speed tracks, it might be okay. But I now worry that because of that compromise they've made, are we actually going to see them fall backwards in the standings because they haven't got that raw pace that they've had for so many years, if that makes sense. So I think with Williams, it's, potentially one step forward, two back is probably the right phrase for it, but not for anything they've done. And I think they've got eyes on 2026 and new regulation change because they haven't got the facilities and budget to make these big sweeping decisions. So I can see why they've done what they've done. I'm impressed with what they've done. The car looks a lot better aerodynamically, and hopefully they can still chase in good points, especially on some of these sprint weekends maybe. And then finally we come to Haas. I believe we come to Haas. If I miss anyone out, then apologies for that, but we're going to say Haas is the final one. Haas are a team in transition. We knew that the car wasn't going to be good. We'd heard all about it, even then saying that they expect to be 10th and they expect to then be able to move at the pack. The reliability looks good. The pace looks awful. So I think they're a team that's going to take that data, hopefully do some number crunching. Hopefully it's given them the data they need back at the factory to make development routes. The Ferrari engine looks good. It looks strong, so that part's good. The parts they're getting from Ferrari look solid. So at least they've got that comfortable knowledge that it's good, it's reliable, it's a good platform to move up from. But I really fear for them in terms of this season. I'm not sure that Komatsu can make a big enough gain to actually send Haas up the grid. But it remains to be seen. It's where it is. I think that's pretty much my order in terms of testing how they're doing. So my order I've got in my head currently, you got Red Bull out in front. I think everyone's clear that Red Bull are the team to beat. You've then got this pack behind them, the chasing pack, which has got Mercedes, it's got Ferrari, it's got Aston Martin, it's got McLaren in it. They're all about the same, and there's going to be some really interesting fights in there. Then I think you've got this sort of V-carb Alpine sort of, almost like stake sort of area, and then you've got this Williams-Haas sort of thing. So I think they're going to be a lot closer. So I think you've almost got these three sections of the grid going into the opening race of the season. You've got Red Bull out in front, you've got this chasing pack, and then you've got the best of the rest in terms of the bottom end of the grid where there's going to be some good fights. One thing I will say, the cars look faster from testing. So, the positive is that, it's amazing that the FIA do all they can to slow these cars down, and yet lo and behold, these engineers find a way to make them faster and faster. The lap record is going to go next week. I've got no doubt about that one. It's certainly going to be beaten, which is going to be really good to see. I think it's going to be an interesting opening race. Reliability problems, we know that obviously Checo had some with the Red Bull, so actually is that a sign because of this condensed car that they've got that might be an Achilles heel for Red Bull? Who knows? It remains to be seen. But we didn't get an engine blow up. We don't tend to get these big engine blow ups anymore. We've had this engine freeze for so many years. They're reliable. They're solid. The fixes in them have been good. We don't tend to get this. But start the season, who knows? It might make a difference. But 24 races. It's going to be a long season. I still think it's going to be Red Bull and Max, but it remains to be seen. And that is pretty much the conclusion for preseason testing. A quick sort of 20-minute roundup of what went on. And I'll have a swig of the coffee and we catch up with a bit of news. Right, so news. Well, the one thing I will say about news is it is in short supply in terms of what's happening. We've got Zak Brown very openly calling for the FIA to step in with Red Bull owning two teams. This then prompted Christian Horner to step in and say, well, actually, Red Bull should be applauded, not criticised for owning two teams because the amount of jobs, the amount of investment they bring to Formula One, the amount of security they bring. Really interesting attack from Christian Horner to go on the attack with it, saying how they should be applauded. In terms of Christian himself, there is no update as of what. We had this fake rumour come out from, I can't remember what the news outlet was, but they spread this, it might have been Viaplay. They spread this fake rumour and then got contradicted on air. They said it was a translation problem, saying that he was going to leave next week on the 29th, caused all sorts. In terms of other news, there isn't really that much. There's a lot of obviously talk with Lewis Hamilton leaving. It looks like Drive to Survive have managed to get a Lewis episode out of the summer move to Ferrari that didn't happen. From what I can see, haven't watched it yet. Looking forward to getting my popcorn out for that one this weekend. In terms of everything else, everything looks quite settled. We're not hearing anything in terms of driver market. I don't think we will, because ultimately I think it's Mercedes who hold the key to that driver market. I think it's Mercedes who hold the key to the next move. George Russell made a comment in the press conference where he said that everybody is ringing Toto. His phone's going non-stop. It's ringing all the time. It will be. Every driver will fancy that Mercedes role now. Whether you're, Joe at the bottom of the grid, Nico Hulkenberg, Kevin Magnussen, everyone will want to chuck their name in that hat for that Mercedes role. So ultimately, I think that's going to be the next move. Them and Checo, I still believe, are the key to the silly season that we're going to get. Once those two are kind of sorted, the rest I think will start falling into place. But I think with regards to drivers at the moment, they don't want to commit. They don't want to take themselves out of the market for that Mercedes seat. They don't want to be the ones to say no. Every man and their dog is being linked to it. We're seeing that Esteban Ocon, Pierre Gasly now in the frame. Alex Albon. In terms of contracts, they can be brought out. Let's just, let's look at Danny Ricciardo and last year of his McLaren contract. So I don't think we should read too much into sort of contract end dates if we're using that as a stopgap. I think that if Toto wants a certain driver, I think he will go all out to get that driver and use whatever influence that he can to secure the driver he wants. But I genuinely think that they're keeping their options open. I genuinely think that they're seeing how this all plays out. And I don't think we're going to get an answer anytime soon. I think we're going to see how the car performs, how the team performs, how the dynamics are, see what's what, and then we're going to get a choice on it. But that's pretty much it for the news. Like I say, there wasn't a lot coming from testing. I expect it to ramp up next week when obviously we go to Bahrain. Well, we are in Bahrain once we stay in Bahrain, but actually go racing, I should say. And that's pretty much it for this week. So a short one again. I don't like making these too long, especially when it's only a weekly one, because I appreciate that people haven't got a lot of time on their hands and actually, take the time listening. Just as always, shameless plugs. If you haven't already, follow me on social medias. I'm pretty much on every platform now. Search F1 Coffee Corner and you'll find it. Like I said, if you haven't, please rate the podcast, share the podcast, try and get it up if you can. I'd really appreciate that one. Massive achievement for me on a personal note. I managed to write my first article for FanAmp this week during testing. If you haven't already, check it out. Let me know what you think. Writing is something that I've always wanted to do in terms of Formula One. Something I've been quite keen to do. Something I am keen to do long term and want to do. And it was really nervous coming out of my comfort zone. It's amazing how I've come quite used to doing videos and TikToks. When I first did that, I was quite nervous. So it's good, I think, to push. I really want to thank Greg and the team for the opportunity. It's going to be out every race. So there's going to be like a technical debrief before the race weekend where you'll get to see what the upgrades are on the car. So hopefully everyone will enjoy that. As always, before the Grand Prix, before qualifying, I'll be joining Adam and Rob on the Fantasy Formula podcast. If you haven't already, sign up for the Fantasy Formula 1 Fantasy Formula League. That's a mouthful, isn't it? Being featured by Formula Ones when they're featured leagues was like an absolute dream come true for us all. So, thank you to everyone who put in their hard work to get that up and running, and for Formula One for, trusting us on their app and giving us that exposure and getting people to sign up. So, with that in mind, I will bid farewell for this week's episode. It feels a rush one. It's an off-the-cuff one on the back of pre-season testing. Plus, I've got 6 episodes of Drive to Survive to get through before the Grand Prix next weekend. So, without further ado, I will bid you all farewell, and I will see you next week.